Hey everyone. I think we should start the session now, Arianna.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Shall I share my screen?
I shall share my screen for a while. Cool. So I think you can see my screen right now. Great, let's begin then. So hi everyone. I'm already seeing a lot of chatter in the chat box. A big warm welcome to everyone who's joined us for this session today. Um, so as researchers, often you have to go through several obstacles on the road to getting published. Um, these could range from selecting a suitable journal for your research or making your manuscript, making sure that your manuscript is structured correctly or that is free of errors, and so many other challenges. So all of these challenges can sometimes make you feel anxious, worried, or stressed out. But as the renowned physicist Marie Curie once said, nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. So similarly, we are conducting this session today to help you develop an understanding of how publishing works, whether it is about preparing a polished and publication-ready manuscript or knowing what you should do once you have submitted your manuscript to the journal. And to help us with all of that today, I have with me Dr. Arianna Ferrini, and she has several peer-reviewed published papers under her belt. And soon today, she will be sharing her secrets to publication success with you. So I hope you're really excited about it. I know I am. But that's not all. Today, we also have not one, but two giveaways and a very, very special offer from Editage. So stay tuned because I'm sure you are going to love the session and everything Ariana has planned for you, as well as all the resources we'll be sharing very soon with you. Before we get started, um, just a few words about Cactus Communications and Editage. So Cactus was formed almost 20 years ago, and it is a technology company with a mission to accelerate science by developing tools and solutions for key players in academia around the world. And Cactus has served several researchers over the span of almost 20 years. Um, Now, with this mission statement in mind, Cactus also has designed and launched several services, keeping the researcher at the center of its focus. And you can see some of these services, some of these brands on the screen right now. And each of these brands serve a very critical researcher need. But today, our focus is today's webinar is powered by Editage. So let me tell you a bit more about Editage as well. Editage is the flagship brand of Cactus, and it is a brand powering this webinar. Editage has provided since 2002 several language editing and other author support services. Um, it has Editage has roughly enhanced more than 2 million research papers since then, and our services are designed keeping two main objectives in mind. One is to bridge the gap between authors and peer-reviewed journals, and second is to accelerate the process of publishing high-quality research. And it does so through all of these editorial services that you can see on the screen, also through EdTech Insights, which is its author education hub, through workshops, webinars, research communication services, and others. So lastly, since I've been talking since a while now, and you must be wondering who this is, I am your session moderator for this webinar. I am Audrey Fernandez, and I've been at Cactus for close to 4 years now. And in my current role, I actively engage with global authors to understand their perspectives and the unique challenges they face, and to develop solutions um, uh, using content along with a really great team. So I also oversee the EdTech Insights Q&A forum, uh, in which I basically connect researchers who've got queries about academic publishing, about anything related to academic publishing. I connect them with senior editors from Editage, so they help coming up with a resolution for these queries. So, so if you have any questions, even later on after this webinar is over, you know where to go. And now I think you must be really eager to hear from your expert. But just a few things before Arianna takes over. And I think you've already read some of the chat, some of the housekeeping notes that have already been added to the chat. But just to reiterate, you can use the chat window that you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. And you can use it, you can start by maybe telling us where you're from, by introducing yourselves, or even sharing your thoughts and experience on the topics that will be covered during the webinar. Now, if you have any questions for Arianna, you could add it next to the chat window. You will see a Q&A box. So you can use that window to add in all of your questions. Please don't add it on the chat because we might miss it. So yeah. And we also have some very exciting giveaways, as I told you before. So please stay tuned for it throughout the webinar. And we will also be releasing a feedback form towards the end. And if you'd like a certificate for this webinar, then please click on that form, and you can indicate there if you want a certificate. Lastly, I am today joined by a very wonderful team of colleagues who are offering support and managing this entire webinar from behind the scenes. So I'd like to shout out to them. One is Neha, who will be who's taking care of logistics and who will be releasing links and resources as and when we mention them during the webinar. And then there's Priyanka, who will be interacting with you in the chat forum, and Anselmo, who is offering support with live streaming this webinar on social media. So just a note, in case you want to, you can also join in from LinkedIn, from Edited's LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter accounts. We are also streaming this webinar live over there. So yeah, without further ado, I'll hand over the session to our expert, Arianna Ferrini, who is a biomedical scientist with over 12 years of academic experience. And she also has a PhD in tissue engineering and regenerative medicine from Imperial College London. She communicating science effectively is her passion, and so she currently works as a freelance scientific writer and a science communication consultant. And she also uh, uh, trains researchers. So like she's doing right now. So over to you, Arianna. I think this conversation is all yours now. I will stop sharing my screen so that the focus is on what you are saying.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Audrey, for the kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for the warm welcome. I'm very excited to give this webinar. And it's really nice to see people literally from all over the world joining. So that's really nice. Okay, so I hope you can all see my screen and we can get started. So once again, welcome today's webinar on how to become a successfully published author. So today we will cover three main areas. First, we will talk about planning your publication strategy, then organizing the information, specifically how to approach writing and how to structure your manuscript effectively. And lastly, we will touch on publication ethics, especially plagiarism and proper citation techniques. So I'll be happy at the end to answer any question. As Audrey mentioned, if you can put them in the Q&A section so they don't get lost, and I'm sure we will have a fruitful discussion at the end. So thinking about the publication process, this is something that's been around forever, but of course now with today's research world is more structured. So the way it works, as scientists, we study something, we observe, we obtain some findings, we write about our findings, and we send the paper to a journal. The first contact at the journal is the editor that receives the article and decides whether it's worth it to send it out for peer review. So the editor sends your paper out for peer reviews. Usually the reviewers are 3, so that if there is some disagreement, let's say if 2 agree for publication and 1 doesn't, we can the editor can come to an agreement. And if the article meets all the editorial and peer review standards, it's published in a journal. Otherwise, it can be sent back to the authors for rejection or for major revision or minor revision. So don't be discouraged. We will see how you can maximize your chance of publishing an article, which of course we know it's a long process and it can be frustrating sometimes. So let's see how we can effectively plan your publication strategy. So the first thing to think about is the journal. Selecting a journal is very important, and maybe it's something that it's not the first thing that comes to your mind. So now we'll see why selecting a journal is important and the factors to consider when selecting a journal, and how you can make sure you've picked the right journal to maximize your chance of publication. So, I mean, this is, excuse me, this is just an example of some covers of some journals. So these are mainly related to biomedical research, but there are thousands of journals out there, and they're all different, and they might all suit different needs. So I want to start with this thing first, that unfortunately now in the academic world, which can be quite competitive, sometimes there's an overemphasis on journal impact factor. So people tend to go to high impact factor journal without considering all the other factors related to choosing a journal for your publication. So most people would like to publish in Nature, Science, PNAS, the Proceeding of the National Academy of Science. So these are, of course, very, very prestigious journals. They are also, especially, so Nature and Science, they are very general. So they would publish anything related to any scientific disciplines that it's important. So you can see how prestigious they are, because if something gets published on Nature or Science, it means it has really wide implication, and it's really important for the whole scientific community, not just for a specific field. However, being pragmatic, the number you see at the bottom is the percentage of what's called desk rejection. So this means a rejection without peer review. So it's really high. It's 78% for Nature, 74% for Science, and 50% for PNAS. So this means that if you send your paper to Nature, in almost 80% of the cases, you will have it back within a couple of days, because the editor-in-chief has decided that your paper is not suitable for publishing on that journal, Nature in this case, so they won't even send it for peer review. So this is called desk rejection, and of course there's nothing wrong with it. The, let's say, good thing about it is that you don't waste a lot of time with desk rejection, because if you try to submit, and that you usually within a week you have your paper back. But to avoid this, you can take some steps and really think about the journal selection. So so we should be pragmatic. Glory isn't everything. So there is the impact factor, of course, of these really prestigious journals. However, there's also a lot of factors to consider: the cost to publish, the topic of the journal, whether it's open access or not. And also what I want to stress is the audience. So what you really want is people to read your papers, people to read the results of your hard work and your research. So more than the impact factor of the paper, a really important factor that you should consider when you're targeting a journal is the target audience. Because even if it's, let's say, a small journal with a lower impact factor, but if it's super relevant to your field, which might be a bit niche, this means that a lot of people are gonna read it, and a lot of people are gonna cite it, which also what ultimately you want. You want your paper to be cited, because it means that it's been useful for someone else. That it means that more research projects, more knowledge is being built, starting from your bricks. Research is made of all these bricks. So your findings are they put a brick and another brick in the wall, and maybe another group from the opposite side of the world, they read your paper, they have an idea, they build on that, and with their findings, citing your paper, they put another brick in the wall. So I hope I gave you an idea of how important the audience is. And the first way to have an idea about the audience, the audience is strictly related to the aims and the scope of the journal. So if you go on the website of every journal, they will most likely have an aims and scope section where they very clearly say what they publish. So this is an example. The journal is called Biological Conservation. It says The journal publishes articles spanning a diverse range of fields that contribute to the biological, sociological, ethical, and economic dimensions of conservation. So if you read this paragraph, you have a really clear idea what the journal is about. So this is the first step to avoid the desk rejection, because you want to send your paper to a journal that it's within scope. So your paper will fit in the journal. Then, as I mentioned, the very important second step is keeping in mind your target audience. In the case of this journal, they very nicely highlight who their target audience is. So in this case, is environmentalists, conservationists, botanists, marine scientists, etc. So you know exactly who is reading this journal. So the question you have to ask yourself is, do I need a marine scientist, for example, to read my paper? Would they find it useful? Would they cite it? Would they disseminate it further? So if the target audience is not who you are targeting with your findings, then you should move on to the next journal. Then, of course, you should also consider the article type. So there are many different types of article. An experimental reports. So when in a paper where you tell the story of a project, small or big, with your findings. You can have a methods paper, and there are methods journals. So journals that only publish methods paper are very useful. So you publish a very detailed protocol for something. For example, there are journals that only publish reviews, which again, very useful to have an overview of the state of the art of a specific field. You can write letters or short communications. Many journals accept them as a kind of a quicker and shorter way to publish some results or to comment on something or some other papers or something that's happening. So yeah, you really want to consider like what type of article you're writing, of course, and then you should think about your paper's applicability. So these are three good examples of a general paper. So this is the Lancet, which again is a very prestigious journal, and it's the cardiovascular disease section of the Lancet. So, but this is general. So anything related to the heart and the vascular system can go here. You can have a specialized, this one in the middle, for example, this is Journal of Cardiovascular Translational Research. So it's not super general, but it's still quite like it's specialized because you need to have something that is translational. So if you've done a basic research project, it's not going to fit in there because they want to publish something that has a translational aspect to it, that has a clinic translation aspect. Or the third example on the right is a super specialized journal, the Annals of Cardiac Anesthesia. So in this case, you would only go here if what you're studying and what you want to publish is really related to this specific field. So, so you can see how you can think about your paper's applicability to different journals. Which is also true in terms of global, regional, or national. So a lot of journals now are global, but for example, Science or International Journal of something. But you can have regional, so the Asian Journal of Medical Research, the European Journal of Cardiovascular Research. Or you can even have national journal, for example, the Canadian Journal of Diabetes or the British Journal oncology. I don't know. So again, you should think about who you want to your target audience to be, and where your paper fits best. Of course, timing matters. So if you need to publish quickly, sometimes to finish a PhD, for example, to get a job, to get a promotion, to get a grant, or this is often the case if you're researching something really time sensitive. Let's think about COVID now. Of course, a lot of people were working on very, very similar projects. So if you want to kind of rush to publish your results before another group, that's timing. Of course, it's something you should keep in mind. And related to this, you should look on the journal website. Often they specify the journal turnaround time. So they say on average how long does it take for the whole process. Not all journals specify that, but it's good to check, and it's something that it's good to think about. Another very important point are the fees and the charges to publish. So if you want your paper to be open access, so this means available to everyone without a paid subscription from an academic institutions, for example. So if you want open access, usually you have to pay more. And sometimes the fees can be quite high. So, for example, you see here we're talking about $3,000 for a research article. However, you can also check that some journals, they have waivers for authors from developing countries. So they, in this case, for example, the remaining publication fee will be only $500 instead of 3,000. So that's also another good thing to check, that you can find on the journal's website. So again, in your checklist and in the list of things you should consider is whether the journal is open access, is hybrid, is subscription only. So now the world of scientific publishing is moving more and more towards an open access policy. And this makes sense because often research is funded by public funding, so by taxpayers. So it's fair that it's available to everyone, and not just to other scientists in other academic institutions, for example, that pay for the subscription to a specific journal. So it's fair that the scientific results are available to the wider community, and not just to the scientific community. So again, the open access story is something to keep in mind. Then at the end, you should really look at the details, whether the journal required the transfer of copyright, if they allow or not supplementary data, whether they have charged for the number of pages, the use of color. So all these details at the end that you should check. And you will have a recording of the webinar, so you can come back to these and have your kind of checklist for your next publication. So the final tip for targeting the right journal is if you are in doubt, you should send a pre-submission inquiry to the journal. So you can write to the editors saying, introducing yourself, saying you have this paper, what the paper is about, why it's important, and also why it's a good match for the journal. So you should think when you write this, even when you write your cover letter for submission, you should think about the editor. So the editor should read your paper and feel lucky and honored that you've chosen their journal to publish, because your paper really fits in their journal scope, with their target audience, with the level of impact factor as well. So you should really think like what would the editors think. So sending a pre-submission inquiry, I mean, it doesn't hurt. Sometimes editors will reply, sometimes they won't. And sometimes they will reply saying, yes, sure, you can submit your paper to our journal. However, if you're encouraged to submit, that's unfortunately it does not guarantee that the paper will get accepted or reviewed. But it's still a good first step, and it doesn't cost you anything. So I suggest this as a good step to put your foot into the publication ladder. So there are some resources that you can use. This Think, Check, Submit. It's a really useful website with checklists to follow before you consider submitting to a journal. So I really recommend you checking this. Especially to avoid what is called predatory publishing, which unfortunately is very common at the moment. So this is a practice where authors are charged really high processing fees, but they don't receive the editorial and publishing services that are usually provided by actual genuine journals, so peer review, for example. So predatory journals, they would publish basically anything without being peer reviewed. So this means that the peer review process is incredibly important to ensure that your data are genuine, they're reproducible, they're trustworthy. So you don't want to publish your paper without peer review, and also you don't want to read anything that's been published just because the authors pay the fee, but without going through any quality control process. So sometimes predatory journals are really easy to spot. Sometimes they are a bit harder. So usually they send invitations to submit papers. So if you received an email, usually they are very flattering and say, hello, Dr. X, we would be honored to have you submit your paper to our journal. So an actual journal does not do that. They won't invite you to submit a paper unless it's an invited review or like something specific. But they usually make promises of rapid publication. If you look at their website, they look quite not like quite dodgy. They have large editorial boards with spread all over the world, and unfortunately they sometimes use picture and names of people, of professors and people from academic institutions all over the world without them knowing. So it's really illegal to do that, and they don't have a contact, like a physical location. They're not indexed in the major database. They say they're indexed in Google Scholar, but yeah, so there are some really clear red flags that you can check. And using this Think, Check, Submit website, you can also find like make sure that what you're submitting to is not a predatory journal. So yeah, at the end, basically you get to check a list of questions, and the recommendation is to submit only if you can answer yes to most of the questions above. So now, as Audrey mentioned in her introduction, we have two very exciting giveaways for you. Niha is gonna put them in the chat where you can download them. So we have two PDF. One is an edited publication schedule template. So this is a really useful planner to plan your journal submission. Also to make yourself accountable for the writing and the submission process. And then the other is 10 things to consider before you choose a rapid publication journal. So I'm sure you'll enjoy this and you'll find them useful. So now let's move on to the second part about preparing the submission package. So the submission package consists of a cover letter and then your paper, which consists of the title page, abstract and keywords, the actual manuscript, tables and figures, plus you can have a supplementary material, graphical abstract, and other things that you want or that you need to submit with your paper. So let's see what makes a great submission package. The cover letter should be concise and clear. It should be clear for the editor why you're submitting to the journal and what the paper is bringing as a novelty. Titles of papers should be captivating and clear. The abstract also is very important because, as you know, and as I'm sure you regularly do, the abstract is the first thing that a lot of researchers read. So you read the abstract to decide if you want to read the whole paper, if it's relevant for you or not. So the abstract should be really clear and should be able to stand alone. So if you read only the abstract without looking at the figures or anything, you have a good understanding of what the paper is about. Again, the figures and tables, they should clearly communicate the key results. They should tell the story, even without reading the text. The methods should be very clear and detailed. So when you write the methods, you should really think about reproducibility. So when you write the methods, think if a scientist in a laboratory on the other side of the world was to read this method, would they be able to repeat exactly what I did and obtain the same results? If the answer is yes, then you've written a good method section. So that's a useful tip, I hope. And of course, the whole package from the cover letter to the manuscript, everything should be really accurate with an appropriate use of language and no typos or errors. When you prepare the submission package, don't think that one size fits all because every journal is different. So you should study each journal carefully and tailor the package to the journal you're submitting to. To do that, it's really important that you follow the author's guideline in terms of how they want to structure the manuscript. So to make things a bit harder, different journals have completely different authors' guidelines. So if you submitted your journal, your paper to a journal and it got rejected, you can't take the same thing and submit it as it is to another journal. You have to check it and make sure it adheres to the author's guideline for the new journal. For example, a typical example is some journals, they want figures and tables embedded in the text, and some other, they want them in a different file or at the end of the manuscript. So, or the references formatted differently. So it's really important because it can put off the editor, because if you send the submission package with your cover letter and your manuscript and it's already not adhering to the guidelines, the editor might think, well, they didn't even bother to read the instructions, so maybe they don't care as much about publishing in this specific journal. So again, I can't stress this enough. Tailor the paper and the materials to every new journal if your paper gets rejected. So the cover letter, it should contain all the details of the corresponding author, a short summary of the importance and the main findings of your research, and then like why you're submitting to the journal. So again, the editor should feel proud that you've chosen their journal for your research. And of course, you should have a conflict of interest declaration and a declaration that the manuscript is original, unpublished, and not under consideration elsewhere, because you can only submit a paper to a journal at once. Then, of course, the submission process, again, is different for different journals, but you can track it by logging into your account. So these are some common reasons for manuscript rejection. There might be a mismatch with the journal scope. So we went through all of these. So I hope now you can see clearly. It can have like your paper might be not as high impact as the journal you're targeted. You might have not followed the instruction. There might be flaws in the study or ethical problems, especially if you're for studies with human samples, and or it can just be poorly written or organized. So these are the common reasons, but I'm sure after this webinar and with the resources that we've given to you, you'll be able to avoid them. So let's see how you should structure your manuscript. So these are my recommendation on how to approach the manuscript, how I think is the best way. So first you should prepare the figures and the tables, because those are what's going to tell the story. Then you should write the methods first, because it's quite easy to write the methods. So it's a good place to start. You don't have the writer's block. You already have something written. Then move to the results, then the discussion, the conclusion, and the introduction and the abstract at the end, because you don't know exactly where the discussion will take you. So it's always good to write a compelling introduction that's relevant to your discussion at the end. Then select the keywords, the acknowledgements, and format appropriately the references. So this is how I would approach the writing process. The main body of the manuscript should usually have, after the abstract, there's the introduction, material and methods, results, and discussion. So this is pretty standard. And the introduction should begin with general information and then narrow down to the specific problem. And at the very end, you should highlight the gap in the literature that you are trying to fill. So state your study rationale and the aims. So to draw the reader to the point of the study. So from the bigger picture to your specific aim. So this, again, is a checklist that you can refer back to for the introduction. Check that any terms and concepts have been defined. You should never assume that the readers know. You should always define acronyms. You should make sure that the research rationale has been highlighted. So what was the background, the rationale behind what you did, and what was your aim. In the methods, again, I've already mentioned you should include enough details so that the readers can really understand and reproduce how the experiments were done. You might use figures for clarity. You can provide often in the supplementary material, you can provide a more detailed version of the procedure, so really step by step. And of course, you should state funding sources for everything. Yeah, the essential check for methods is to be as specific as detailed as possible to facilitate reproducibility, to give all the information on the design, the sample, the ethics, for example. And also, you should include a data analysis section to explain which statistical test you run, which analysis you perform to answer your research questions. The results, well, it's easy. You should include what did you find. So just an objective description of what you found without any comments or explanation. So just describe your major findings. In theory, this section can be the shortest because a lot of the information is in the table and the figures. So you're just describing what the figures are about, but this is usually very short and very objective. So when to use tables and figures? If you have numerous values or other data, if you want to compare groups, or if you need to really show precise values, you can use a table. On the other hand, if it's more important for you to show a trend or a pattern or a sequence of events, you should use a figure. So think about whether the story you're trying to tell, it's better explained with a table or with a figure or with a combination of both. So in the results, you should have the most important results first. And then it's really important to have table and figure legends that are self-sufficient. Again, people should be able to read, to only look at the results section, the figures with the legend, and understand the story and the main findings. The discussion is quite different from the results because it discusses the results in the context of research and the previous literature. So you should acknowledge conflicting or unexpected results. You should say, we found this, but this other group found that, and this could be the explanation. You should not repeat the results. Just at the beginning, a very brief summary, like 2 sentences, and then you should discuss them without overgeneralizing or exaggerating, and also without overselling your research. You don't forget to mention the limitation and also the strengths of your paper. And it's really important at the end of the discussion to suggest some implications, some future work, so people, when they read, they might have ideas, as we were saying at the beginning, to keep building, putting bricks and keep building knowledge based on what you found and what you discussed. The title should, of course, be engaging, should capture the reader's attention, and it should really condense the paper in a few words. So really think long and thoroughly about the title, because it's like the business card for your paper. The title and the abstract are the main thing that more people are gonna read. Then they're gonna decide if they want to go on. Again, the abstract should be clear, very concise, within the word limit. Again, check the guidelines of the specific journal, and don't use many abbreviation in the abstract because it makes it less readable. The keywords at the end of the abstract, they should be accurate because they will be very useful to help your paper be found in a search engine, and check especially again the journal guidelines, if they have specific guidelines for keyword. So very briefly, we're going to touch on the ethics, so the publication ethics, how to avoid plagiarism. So plagiarism occurs when authors don't give credit to previous work done in the field, so you present their work as their own. the earlier work as their own, or if they also use their own previously published work without acknowledging the earlier results. This is called self-plagiarism. If they reproduce figures and tables from other work without permission. So these are all cases of plagiarism, which is a really serious thing, and it should be avoided. And of course, it's a reason for rejection. So the main and only tip to avoid plagiarism is to properly cite previous research. So usually you should paraphrase or summarize, like rewrite in your own words, while of course retaining the original meaning, and always cite the original author. Never assume that you are referring to something that is common scientific knowledge. Of course, even in this context, you can use professional editing services that can polish the language if they're not confident about the writing, and they can check also the reference formatting to avoid plagiarism and to make sure everything is cited properly. So with this, just a very quick summary before our Q&A. So first, choose a journal whose scope matches your papers. Be aware of predatory journals. Use the Think, Check, Submit resource. Plan your publication schedule using the planner that we've given to you today. Ensure that you have a really strong and effective submission package. Write each section of your article very carefully, and especially checking for every section the preparation guidelines of the specific journal, and adhere to all the publication ethics in terms of referencing and complying with the journal requirements for ethical declarations. So with this, I'll hand it over to Audrey again. And then I'm happy to start the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Arianna. This was lovely. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience, they totally loved your presentation and will find it very useful when they're preparing their manuscript. So I guess before we move on to the Q&A session, I will make a quick announcement. So let me just share my screen so you can see it. Yeah. So Editage is running an exclusive offer for all those who have registered for this event, and you can use the you can see the coupon code over here on the screen. Right now, we will also, Neha will be releasing the link to the Editage website. So you can learn how you can use this coupon by heading over to the Editage website and getting a gist of what are the different author support services Editage offers. You can use this coupon code directly at checkout. So this is one of the things that that I wanted to tell you about. And before we begin with the Q&A round now, if Neha has already released the link to the Editage website, she will also be sharing a link to the feedback form, and many of you had questions about it earlier. So please click on the link to the feedback form. One of the questions over there is about whether you'd like a participation certificate, and you can also indicate how exactly you want your name to appear in the certificate. So please click on it and submit the form. You'll also receive this certificate within the next 2 weeks. So just note about that. Now let's finally move on to the most exciting session where you get to where Arianna will directly answer questions that you have. So it's a Q&A session. We'll be addressing some of the questions you have shared until now.
Yeah. So I think we can already start with some of the questions.
Sure.
So I see now Arif is asking, what should I do if I believe my paper should be published in a higher impact journal, but I don't have the funds to pay for it? So yeah, that's a great point. As I mentioned, some journals they offer waivers for authors, specifically from some countries. Another tip, another thing that can be done is when you write the next grant. So when you ask money for your research to funders, you can include a specific section when you're budgeting for your research. You can include publishing fees in your grants. So maybe you can increase the chance of having the funds to pay for it. So yeah, hope that answer the question. So okay, another question is, can we easily find the Scopus index journals which not charge authors? I mean, yeah, this is linked to the answer I just gave. So as I mentioned in the webinar, now more and more journals are doing these waivers, and you can check on their website. You can contact them also if you don't find any information. I would say that's the easiest way to find out. Then a question: how to keep our research secure from other researchers apart from publishing fast? Well, yeah, that's a good point, because of course you want to be careful. So research in science is all about sharing, but of course you have to maintain confidentiality. And so my tip for this would be, for example, when you present your work at a conference, which is really useful, and it's useful to get feedback, it's useful to build potential collaborations. So not necessarily when you're already published, even before you've published, but I would suggest you only present, for example, the results at a conference when you're quite close to publishing. So that could be a way to keep it secure, because you've already built a lot of work. So yeah, in this case, you would be safer, because even if you present the research before publishing it. Then of course it also depends on what's the culture in your lab, in your department. There are some places where they kind of don't allow, so you're only allowed to present after you've published. So yeah, it's all a fine balance between having to share but not overshare, especially in the very early phases, when otherwise unfortunately other people can kind of steal your ideas. Okay.
I think with regards to rapid publication, they have another question, which is about, so if you're publishing it fast, along with security concerns, there's also this concern about, poor quality results. So
yeah, that of course it is a concern, but if you picked a legit journal, and if your paper goes through peer review, then you can be certain that what gets published, it's a high quality anyway. So of course, yeah, again, it's a fine balance. You don't want to rush, but the peer review process, it's in place to avoid that. So yeah. I see a question here coming from social media: how to increase my total number of my citations? That's kind of $1 million questions, because there's not much you can do. It's up to other people reading and citing your research. But as I said, the first part of the webinar, a very important thing is to pick the right journal. So if you publish in a journal that you know is going to be read by the people that you want to cite your paper, then of course this maximizes your chances of getting more citation. Yeah. So any other questions? How to edit my research for publications? You can use professional editing services such as Editage. You can get the most of the coupon that we gave to you today. You can also, like, a general tip for writing is the more you read, the better you'll become at writing. So a tip I always give is to read a lot of papers, because even if English is not your native, your first language, it's a matter of training. That the more you read the good papers, the more you'll be able to write well.
I think we can answer, because the time is up, we can
Yeah.
answer the rest of the questions probably on EdTech Insights.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Arianna. Thank you all for such wonderful questions. I think that they were really thinking questions, and so yeah, that's it for today. But it has been such a great, exhilarating discussion. Arianna, I remember you saying science is all about sharing, spoken like a true science communicator. Yeah, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Arianna.
thank you. No, thank you for having me, and thank you to all the attendees for your attention and your questions.
Definitely. And thank you, Neha, Mriganka, and Anselmo as well, for all your support tonight. And everybody who has joined and engaged in this conversation, in this making this a very, very fruitful discussion. So also, if in case you've missed anything, any of the links, the coupon, don't worry. We will soon be communicating the same to you again in the form of an email summary. So you will receive even the recording of this event soon. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you. You have all been very wonderful. Have a great
Thank you.
rest of the week, everyone.
Thank you very much.